Virginia Republican Eric Cantor is the new House Majority Leader, and he joins us this morning from Capitol Hill. Thanks so much for being with us this morning, Congressman.
Karen, good morning. Thank you.
So the first big item on the agenda, the repealing of health care. It's a bill, though, that no one expects to go anywhere beyond the House. Is it a waste of time that could potentially be spent on some other big issues?
Karen, no, it's not, because what we heard from the people when they went to the polls in November is they wanted Washington to stop business as usual and get down to work to try and cut spending and shrink the size of this government so we could see results for the families and businesses of this country. What we do know is the Obamacare bill spends money we don't have. We also know it has had a lot of follow-up regulations that have provided a disincentive for small businesses to grow jobs. And it doesn't provide the kind of health care that people want. Republicans want to provide access to good health care. We just know there's a better way. So we're going to pass a resolution next week on the floor of the U.S. House that repeals Obamacare. And we want the President and the Senate to work with us to try and achieve a better way so that more Americans can have access to affordable health care and stress the fact that it's the doctor-patient relationship, not the government, that should be governing what kind of health care people get.
I want to ask you about a couple of things on that note. The latest CNN poll showing, this is after the election, shows pretty much a split, actually. It has 49% of people saying yes, they agree with you, repeal and replace. About a quarter saying leave it as is, and then a quarter who would like to see actually more government involvement. So is it a bit of an exaggeration to say that Americans don't want this health care bill?
No, Karen, I don't. I think your numbers speak for themselves. I think there's other polling indicating that Americans just don't want Washington controlling the kind of health care they have access to. Republicans believe that we should have more competition, more choice. We believe we ought to do something to try and get the lawsuits out of the examining room so we can help bring down costs. And we believe ultimately it is the families that want to choose the kind of health care that they want, not some bureaucrat here in Washington. We know that this health care bill is over $1 trillion cost, spending money we don't have. And so we're going to take the first step to try and deliver on our promise that we're going to repeal this bill, we're going to stop spending money we don't have, and we're going to change the culture here in Washington. And that's what I hope that you'll begin to see today as we take to the floor of the U.S. House.
Well, the Congressional Budget Office, and I know you might quibble with their numbers, but they say that health care reform will actually do one of the key things you want, which is to reduce the federal deficit. They say by $140 billion over 10 years. And even if you don't necessarily agree with that number, of course, there's no doubt that health care costs are going to continue to dig us deeper into a deficit. So how do you make that money up if it's not through this measure, if it's not through this law, and it's not depriving people of being able to get health care?
Karen, I think most people know, whether you're in Washington or outside the Beltway, that you know this bill has the potential to bankrupt the federal government or the states. I mean, as we've seen, there are many governors on both sides of the political aisle very concerned about what Obamacare is going to do to the fiscal health of the states. So we want to take a much more prudent approach. And from the fiscal standpoint, we're going to go about reducing discretionary spending across the board to 2008 levels. We're going to save the taxpayers money. Each and every week, we've committed to bringing a bill to the floor that reduces spending, that actually changes the culture here in Washington, that folks are not coming here to see what they can do to spend more, but actually to spend less. And Karen, that is the way we're going to start today, and you'll see that happen every single week.
Well, Congressman, is this easier said than done? I mean, some of the moves that you guys have talked about, wanting to try to cut $100 billion from the domestic spending this year, cuts into popular programs. You talked about complaints from the states and concerns about that. If there's an across-the-board cut, 20% in things like transportation and education, I mean, in some cases, you can't even get Senate Republicans to agree to that. How is that going to happen in reality?
Well, first of all, I think the message from the election in November was the American people get that we are living beyond our means. We have got to tighten the belt, and what we're talking about is returning to 2008 levels. Most people know that the sun rose and set in 2008, before the bailouts, before the stimulus bill. That's what our intention is, and we're going to work together. I talked to the president yesterday, and I said, we want to work with you. If your intent is to cut spending, shrink the size of this government. And I also told him I hope he begins to reevaluate the kind of regulatory environment that has persisted in Washington over the last 2 years, because we want to see job growth, and the agencies here in Washington have caused an impediment to small businesses creating jobs.
It's kind of interesting. So, you're coming out there and you're saying we want to dismantle basically your biggest legislative achievement, Mr. President, but you're also meeting with him. I mean, where are you guys finding common ground?
I do think that the common ground, Karen, is in cutting spending. And I expect when the president comes to deliver the State of the Union address, for him to lay out some significant spending cuts. You know, the president's talked a lot about joining Republicans and banning earmarks here in Washington. I asked the president if he could call Leader Harry Reid in the Senate and ask him to join us in this. I also think that we have to come together on both sides of the aisle to say that it's jobs first. It's about getting Americans back to work. I've asked the president if he would be specific in terms of his ideas for tax reform. You know, we Republicans believe that we've got a competitive disadvantage here in this country, and what that means, it translates into a lack of jobs. And we've got to reverse that trend and get America back on track to win again.
Yeah, well, most people would agree. We do want to see that for sure. It was great to talk to you this morning, House Majority Leader Eric Cantor. Thanks so much.
Karen, thank you.